Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 28th of August of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. If you remember, a few videos ago we have already compared the Ukrainian greatest counter-offensive operation with the assault operation of Wagner's when they were trying to establish control over Vuhledar and Artyomovsk. And we found a lot of common things between those two operations. And we basically tried to find an answer, and I believe we got an answer where exactly, if we compare these two offensive operations, the Ukrainians are located when talking about the Wagner. And we probably understand that currently the Ukrainians are located somewhere in the beginning of May of Wagner's offensive operation in Artyomovsk. So basically we're at the end of the Ukrainian greatest counter-offensive operation, which probably will be ended in a month or in the next few weeks. But today I would like to discuss and to compare another battle, two important battles that took place in the 2022 and that currently is taking place in the vicinity of Robotyne. If you remember, in 2022 there was a very important and powerful battle from the Russian side when the Wagners were trying to establish control over Popasna. And basically the Popasna of 2022 is the same situation as Robotyne from the Ukrainian side of 2023. Because the Russians were trying to storm and to capture the settlement, and basically they were trying to penetrate the first Ukrainian defense belt. Because these black dots are not the Russian defense belt. That used to be the Ukrainian defense belt that Ukrainians built in 2014 during the first Ukrainian crisis or something like this. And currently the Ukrainians are trying to repeat the same situation and to penetrate the Russians' defense belt in Robotyne. And there is a military term by the name of flower. And when talking about Popasna, we called not just like the Battle of Popasna, we called that situation as the flower of Popasna. And when the Russians managed to penetrate the belt, that Ukrainian belt, we call that situation as the flower of Popasna bloomed. What does it mean, the flower, from the military perspective? What does it mean, the flower blooms? Today we will try to analyze and to give the answer regarding Robotyne. What is Robotyne flower and what does it mean, Robotyne flower blooms? First of all, currently the Ukrainians are trying to create their own Robotyne flower from the military perspective. And to complete a successful creation of this flower, the Ukrainians still need to develop their bridgehead in the vicinity of Robotyne, of course, to the west from Robotyne. The Ukrainians still need to develop their positions and their offensive operation to the south, trying to develop their southern leaf of the Robotyne flower. And of course, the Ukrainians need to capture the Russian fields, the positions of the Russians among the fields between Verbova, Novopokrovka, and Novofyodorovka. So basically, the Ukrainians, to complete the creation of Robotyne flower, they need to capture these three footholds. And if they're able to do this, then we can say that the flower of Robotyne has been created, and after that we can say that the flower of Robotyne is ready to bloom. What does it mean, to bloom? For example, if the Ukrainians capture every single foothold that we just discussed, they will be able to attack in direction of Kopany. The Ukrainians will be able to attack in direction between Kopany and Rivne and the Ilichkova. The Ukrainians will be able to attack in Ilichkova. The Ukrainians will be able to attack in direction of Nova Prokopovka. They can attack in direction to the south, in direction of Acheritovate. The Ukrainians will be able to attack in direction of Verbova from the south and of course from the northeast. The Ukrainians will be able to attack through the fields in direction of Novofyodorovka, and of course the Ukrainians will be able to attack in Novopokrovka. So this is the situation, and we can call the situation as Robotyne flower blooms. So it's like leaves in different directions. And the main benefits of this situation is that Ukrainians, according to this structure and configuration of the front line, can accumulate just a single army somewhere in the central part of the flower. Let's call it like 4,000 of Ukrainian soldiers can be located in the central part, and from this direction they are able and they can choose the next direction to attack. Just 4,000 soldiers or 20,000, it doesn't matter. The matter is that what matters is that the Ukrainians have right to choose where to attack. And from this perspective, the Russians from the other side need to keep, let's say, 3,000 soldiers in every single settlement, because they need to be sure that Ukrainians are not able to penetrate the defense belt. Because And now we see the ratio. The Ukrainians can keep 5,000 soldiers, and the Russians need to keep 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 27,000 soldiers to be sure that Ukrainians are not able to penetrate the fence belt in any of these directions. And if the Ukrainians are able to penetrate, then this military situation has the name of that flower blooms, or the flower have bloomed. This is the situation. And if you ask my opinion, we see that Ukrainians are trying to create this Popasnaya flower, but if you ask my opinion, I see that Ukrainians don't have enough of time to complete the flower. Because if we compare the square kilometers that they have already captured or returned and that they need to capture, it's almost the same sizes. So the Ukrainians have already entered Robotyne, the fields, and to develop attack to the flanks and to the south, it's almost the same square kilometers in comparison with the previous achievements. So, but the previous achievements, they spent around 3 months to capture these fields in Robotyne. So basically, if we will prolong this situation, we understand that Ukrainians need another 3 months, but they don't have 3 months. They have just 2, 3, maximum 4 weeks for their offensive operation, because in a month, in the beginning of October, a very bad weather is going to come in this region. There's going to be rainy weather. The quality of the ground is going to be very poor, and from this moment, the Ukrainians are no longer be able to use tanks and armored vehicles. Furthermore, they will not be able to use infantry because they're going to be rainy. The trenches will be completely flooded, and the situation is going to be critical. And the only thing they will be able to do is to hold the progress they managed to achieve. And this is the reason why Zelensky started talking with the Western authorities by asking them to provide him more help and more sponsorship in the 2024, because he understands that the only thing that Zelensky can achieve this year is to save the progress. Because if Zelensky will be defeated with his army in Robotyne, then the next year he will be forced to start everything, of course, from the beginning, and from the beginning to start again the Battle of Robotyne, to start demining the fields and so on. So the only thing he can do is to save the local progress, the current progress. I'm not sure that the Russians are going to counterattack. Basically, they don't need to counterattack, because if Zelensky and his Ukraine army are able to hold this situation, the next year, if they restart their offensive operation, the Russians basically will build another 4 or maybe 3 or maybe 5 lines of defense on the south of Robotyne, and basically the progress of this year will be reduced to minimum. The value of the progress of this year will be reduced to minimum. So this is the situation. The Russians reported that as a result of clashes in the area of Robotyne flower, the Ukrainians lost around another 160 soldiers. So the level of losses is less in comparison with the previous days. We got few geolocated from the Ukrainian side. For example, in this video, we see how the Ukrainians were trying to storm this settlement from the west, which confirms the Ukrainian control, at least of the western part. And we got the video of Ukrainian attempts to establish control and to develop their foothold in the central part. They have landed their infantry in the post office. The Russians controlled the entire situation, and there was at least 2 attempts to land the troopers, and at some point the Russians started bombing and shelling the post office, and probably as a result of that attack, the Ukrainians who were located in the post office were buried under the ruins of the building. Anyway, we will keep the Robotyne in yellow color as the territory under Ukrainian control. And now we're moving further to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. Today we got also a lot of interesting updates from this area, and mainly from the Russian side. If we compare the number of Russian icons and the Ukrainian icons, we see that the Russians, at least today and maybe the yesterday, had and have complete superiority, artillery and drone superiority. Today we got a lot of videos. The Russians, using the Lancet strikes, destroyed some artillery systems along the forest line. The Russians destroyed some supply trucks that were located among the forest lines somewhere in the western part of this bridgehead. The Russians were using cluster rounds to attack the Ukrainian positions in Makarova, trying not to allow them to concentrate their forces before the next offensive operation. The Russians were bombing the fields between Robotyne and Donetsk. They were trying to attack the Ukrainian trenches and Ukrainian infantry who were hiding in between these forest lines. And the Russians were destroyed another stronghold somewhere in the north. So complete superiority. I don't know what did happen with the Ukrainians, but as I understand, something have happened. Probably the Ukrainians are trying to keep a silence, trying to accumulate forces, rounds, artillery rounds, munition, so on before the next wave of attack. But the level of damage that the Russians currently are able to deal to the Ukrainians can reduce any attempt from the Ukrainian side to accumulate their forces, because basically they will be defeated even before the beginning of any offensive operation. The only update from the Ukrainian side we got is that how the 36th Marine Brigade discovered the Russian ammo depot somewhere among the fields, and as a result of cluster rounds attack, the ammo depot was destroyed. So nothing special, just one update for today. Before we continue to South Donetsk and Donetsk area, I would like to discuss with you another important town, Energodar. Since the beginning of this year, probably we haven't received many updates from this bridgehead. The only thing we got probably was the situation with the Kakhovka reservoir, and today the Ukrainians published at least 2 videos of their attacks with the FPV drones against the civilian area, against the residentials of the said city. As a result of one of those attacks, the car of local authorities who works with the Russians was damaged. On another video, we see how another FPV drone attacked some building in the central part of Energodar, probably some another local authorities office or something like this. Anyway, we see that Ukrainians started testing. Those attacks wasn't just like attempts to kill somebody, of course not. The main purpose of those drones were to test the system, to test EW systems, and to test Russian air defense systems before something bigger and something more important. And probably the battle of Energodar has started with reconnaissance operations with FPV drones. Now we are moving further to Donetsk and South Donetsk area, and from this bridgehead we got also a lot of geolocated videos, mainly from the Russian side. The Russians are bombing heavily this area. We also can mention and can say that there is no counter-artillery duel from the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians haven't published almost nothing in this bridgehead since the beginning of the previous week and this week, and the Russians almost every single day published another video how they destroy another drone, another mortar position, another armored vehicle, another ammo depot. From the Ukrainian side, we got just one video of 59th Motorized Brigade, how they managed to discover local ammo depot some among the fields, and as a result of FPV drone, that ammo depot was destroyed with a very heavy explosion. The Russians continue pressure against Avdiivka. There was a video how the Russians managed to discover and to destroy Ukrainian radar that was located on the high-rising building. As a result of that attack, the Ukrainians lost another communication center, and the Russians continue bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions in the water pulp station. And this is the third video during this for this month, 4th of August. The Russians are trying to suppress and to destroy the Ukrainian positions, and probably and very soon the Russians will make another attempt to attack this area. One more time, if we increase the number of days since the beginning of August, we see at least 3 attacks from the Russian side, 2 drones attacks and 1 artillery bombing. So very nice and very big pressure from the Russian side against this stronghold of the Ukrainian forces. When talking about Bakhmut, Artyomovsk, Klishchiivka, we got a lot of very interesting details, updates, and probably the most important are coming from the forest in the vicinity of Zhelyznyansk. If you remember, we discussed that a few days ago. The Ukrainians launched offensive operation in that area, and as a result of that attack, probably managed to enter the forest and start clearing operation. And I promised myself not to update this area until we get more details, more confirmation from the Ukrainian side. And today we got another video from this area. We will notch this video because of casualties and violence. And according to that video, the Ukrainians have almost completed the clearing of the forest, and they forced the Russians to step back. I have split this forest in 2 parts. Probably the Russians still have control over some part of the forest, over the southern part, but the Ukrainians probably controls the majority of the forest and continue forcing the Russians to step back. And this is a very critical situation, because if the Ukrainians are able to capture this forest, they will get operational square, and basically and automatically the Russian fortification in Zhelyznyansk and Russian garrison in Zhelyznyansk will be collapsed automatically, and the Russians will be forced to step back, and the Ukrainians will achieve operational square. And we can call a small, let's call it Zhelyznyanskaya flower, because after that the Ukrainians will be able to continue pressure and probably to force the Russians to step back very deep to the direction of Paraskoivka. So the critical situation, and this situation develops not in Russian favor, at least in the vicinity of Zhelyznyansk. We will pay more attention to this area because I expect real activation. And the main Ukrainian forces who operates in this area is the Ukrainian 30th Mechanized Brigade, this one with this icon. When talking about Kupiansk and Lyman Frontline, we haven't received many updates. When talking about Lyman, just updates that confirms and corrects the geolocations. On this video, we see how the Russian forces discovered and tracked the Ukrainian positions in Kremenная forest, and they were bombing and shelling the Ukrainian positions, which confirms that probably this part of Kremenная forest is under Ukrainian control. And as you can see, the Russians were bombing very deep inside of probably their positions. So before the next video, probably we'll update the map and we'll show this progress, or at least that this area is under Ukrainian control. And today the Russians published the video how they were bombing and shelling the Ukrainians on the west of Kremenная, which confirms the Russian control at least over this part, and that this area is under Ukrainians. When talking about Kupiansk, we haven't received many updates. The Ukrainians continue controlling the Russian forces in the vicinity of Raigorodka and Karamzinovka bridgehead. As we discussed, the Ukrainians have established full road control, support control over the Russian forces on the western side of Zhiribets River. The Russians are using the road between Svatovo and Raigorodka to supply and support their forces. And as you can see, the Ukrainians established drone control, and almost every single day they publish another video how they attacked or destroyed another Russian armored vehicle. For example, in this video, we see how the Russians brought armored vehicle and they landed. Maybe they was making some kind of rotation or just unpacking the armored vehicle, but the Ukrainians didn't waste their time. They brought FPV drone and bombed this armored vehicle with grenade, and after that the armored vehicle was destroyed. The Russians continue their counter-artillery duels on the Kupiansk front line. If we get the data since the beginning of the August, we see significant number of Russian artillery and drone strikes. There are also complete artillery and drone superiority of the Russian forces, and we can see that there is complete absence of Ukrainian counter-artillery duels. So anyway, the situation with the Ukrainian forces, to be more precise, with the Ukrainian artillery forces on the Kupiansk front line is very poor and very bad. The Russians continue pressure, continue suppressing Ukrainian artillery forces. On this video, we see another destroyed Ukrainian artillery system somewhere in the vicinity of Kupiansk as a result of artillery strike. And we got also another artillery shelling of Kislovka-Kotlarovka area where the Ukrainians were trying to make rotation or probably to evacuate some forces in direction of the Kupiansk. Another interesting update is coming from Russia, from Moscow. Today, the Ukrainian special forces published the video saying that in the end of September, the Russians are planning to start another wave of mobilization. If you ask my opinion, it's obvious. I believe that it is going to happen for many reasons. I have calculated at least 5 reasons why the Russians need to start mobilization. First of all is that the most important, that Ukrainians are going to mobilize another 2,000 or 200 or 300,000 soldiers. This is the first reason. The second one is that the Russian soldiers on the ground on the combat line since the beginning of the special military operation, and they need the normal rotation process. So for rotation process, they need them to make mobilization. The third reason is that the Ukrainians are planning to continue war in the next year, in 2024. So that's why they need to have forces to fight the next year. Also, the Ukrainians are planning, the Russians, according to some source, are planning to start their own offensive operation somewhere in Sumy and Kharkiv region. This is another reason to start mobilization process. And the fifth situation, the fifth reason, I forgot about it. Okay, never mind. So as you can see, there are at least more than 3, around 4 or 5 reasons why the Ukrainians need to start, and the sources are saying that probably in the end of September the Russians will do this, and we're going to see the next phase of the special military operation in Ukraine. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds me to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.